They told you love is about holding on, about patience, loyalty, sacrifice. So when your body screamed and your chest tightened at his words, when something invisible in the room made you shrink, you blamed yourself, called it anxiety, trauma, overreacting. But what if it wasn't any of that? What if it was your intuition whispering, leave before you forget who you are? This is not a list of red flags. This is a resurrection, a journey into the 10 sacred reasons your intuition, that silent priestess of truth, intervened to protect you from a partner was never capable of meeting your soul. Asterisk. Let's begin. 1. Because your body knew what your mind wasn't ready to admit. Before the betrayal had a name, before the lies wore words, your body had already begun to whisper its warnings. It wasn't dramatic, it was subtle. Tightening of the chest when his name lit up your phone. Slight but persistent nausea when he touched you after a fight. A drop in energy after each interaction, like your soul was being siphoned. The body is ancient, older than logic, older than romance. It doesn't argue with alerts. It contracts in the presence of falsehood, even when the face before you is smiling. You may have told yourself it was just anxiety, overthinking, or old trauma resurfacing. But in truth, your nervous system was sounding the alarm before your mind could catch up, and it was right. This wasn't paranoia. It was perception. You didn't need a reason to feel off, you needed to trust that feeling. Every time you ignored it, a small part of you felt abandoned. But your body never stopped speaking. Sleepless nights, in tight throats, in the tears that came without warning. Your body remembered what your mind tried to forget. You were not safe. And so your intuition pulled you away. Not because you didn't care, because some part of you still did too. Because the love you were receiving was not love, it was control. It looked like affection. It sounded like devotion. But beneath the surface, it was full of conditions. He gave when you were easy to please, when you mirrored his expectations, when you stayed silent in the name of peace. But when you expressed pain, fear, or even independence, his love evaporated. That wasn't love. It was manipulation, disguised as intimacy. You weren't being held, you were being handled. The difference is subtle, but your intuition noticed. Even when you couldn't articulate it, you felt it. The pressure to smile when you wanted to scream. It's the shrinking of your truth to keep him from withdrawing. The fear of honesty becoming a habit. Love, real love, expands you. Control compresses you. Real love holds you when you're messy, not just when you're pleasant. But he couldn't do that. He only stayed when you stayed small, and your intuition saw it all. It didn't matter how charming he was, how passionate he seemed, or how convincing his remorse was. Your inner knowing watched the patterns and whispered, "This is not home. This is a cage." You may have stayed a little longer, hoping he'd change, but deep down, you knew love should never require self-erasure 3, because he mirrored your old wounds, not your true worth. You didn't fall for him by accident. There was a familiarity in his chaos, haunting echo, in the way he withdrew, criticized, dismissed. It reminded you of something, or someone. Maybe a parent who was unpredictable, a sibling who mocked your sensitivity, a past lover who never chose you fully. He wasn't just a man, he was a mirror. And what you saw in him wasn't your reflection, but your repetition. That's why it felt magnetic. That's why you called it chemistry. Because your inner child thought, if I can make him love me, I will finally heal the one who didn't. But your intuition wasn't trapped in the past. It saw what your heart couldn't. It knew you weren't meant to live in emotional déjà-vu. And so, it nudged you, sometimes softly, sometimes violently, to look again. To ask, is this really love, or is this a wound masquerading as destiny? That question broke the trance, because when your soul is ready to evolve, it won't let you stay where your trauma feels comfortable. He wasn't your forever. He was your lesson, and your intuition knew the moment that lesson was complete, for because the silence after his love felt louder than any storm. It's not just what he did, it's what he didn't do. The absences that screamed louder than words. The cold silence after you cried. The way he turned his back, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. You began to realize you were lonely while sharing a bed. You were aching while holding hands. Your grief wasn't for a breakup, was for a connection that never truly existed. The illusion of intimacy, the performance of closeness, but beneath it, you were alone. Your intuition refused to normalize that loneliness. It knew that love isn't supposed to feel like exile. It's not meant to make you question your sanity, your worth, your belonging. And so, in the quiet of those empty nights, your intuition screamed. Through the weight in your chest, through the urge to run, through the moments you stared at the door. It was trying to wake you, not because you were weak, but because you were too strong to keep playing dead in a story that never saw your soul thrive. Because you weren't safe to be fully expressed. You started editing yourself, leaving out the truth in conversations, softening your edges so he wouldn't feel threatened, laughing at jokes that hurt, staying silent during moments that demanded your voice. That wasn't love. That was oppression. And your intuition felt every word you swallowed, every truth you buried, at every moment you betrayed yourself in the name of keeping the peace. But peace built on silence is just another kind of war. The longer you stayed, the more you disappeared. But your intuition wouldn't let you vanish. It kept sending signals through rage, through sadness, through sudden bursts of clarity. It kept saying, you are not meant to shrink. You are meant to rise. And slowly, you did. You spoke up. You cried in front of him. You let the truth rise, even when it shook the room. And yes, he hated it, Akana. But that's how you knew it was real. Because the truth will always disrupt what was never rooted in love. Because your dreams started warning you before your eyes could, long before the conscious mind catches on. The subconscious begins to speak in symbols, and you started dreaming of drowning, of betrayal, of losing your voice, of being trapped in strange places. The dreams didn't always make sense, but they carried an emotional signature: fear, helplessness, alarm. They weren't random. They were messages, your soul's way of saying, look closer. Dreams are the language of intuition when words fail, and yours were trying to rescue you from the illusion before it consumed you. You may have woken up, breathless, confused, even disturbed. You may have brushed it off, convinced it was just stress or imagination. But your intuition knew. It used your dreams to bypass your rationalizations, send you images that would stay in your body, to plant seeds of truth in your sleep, so that when your eyes opened, you would be less willing to deny what you felt. The dreams weren't trying to scare you, they were trying to protect you, because his love required your silence, not your truth. In the beginning, it felt like he adored your honesty, but slowly, you noticed he only welcomed parts of you. The parts that agreed with him, the parts that admired him, the parts that made him feel powerful. But when your truth diverged, when you challenged him, expressed pain, or named a boundary, his love withdrew. He became cold, defensive, mocking. And so, you started censoring yourself, not because you were afraid of losing him, but because you already were. Your intuition noticed the pattern. It noticed how you began to walk on eggshells, rehearsing your words, predicting his moods. That's not what love does. Love creates space for truth even when it's uncomfortable. But his love made your truth feel like betrayal. And so, your soul intervened, not by shouting, but by nudging. by making it harder to pretend, by making you restless in the silence. Until one day, you chose to speak. Not because you knew what would happen, but because you couldn't keep swallowing yourself to keep him close. Because love required your silence, not your truth. In the beginning, it felt like he adored your honesty, but slowly you noticed he only welcomed parts of you, the parts that agreed with him, the parts that admired him, the parts that made him feel powerful. But when your truth diverged, when you challenged him, expressed pain, or named a boundary, his love withdrew. He became cold, defensive, mocking. And so, you started censoring yourself. Not because you were afraid of losing him, but because you already were. 'Cause his love required your silence, not your truth. In the beginning, it felt like he adored your honesty, but slowly, you noticed he only welcomed parts of you. The parts that agreed with him, the parts that admired him, the parts that made him feel powerful. But when your truth diverged, when you challenged him, expressed pain, or named a boundary, his love withdrew. He became cold, defensive, mocking. And so, you started censoring yourself, not because you were afraid of losing him, but because you already were. Your intuition noticed the pattern. It noticed how you began to walk on eggshells, rehearsing your words, predicting his moods. That's not what love does. Love creates space for truth even when it's uncomfortable. But his love made your truth feel like betrayal, and so your soul intervened. Not by shouting, but by nudging, by making it harder to pretend, by making you restless in the silence. Asterisk, asterisk. Until one day, you chose to speak. Not because you knew what would happen, but because you couldn't keep swallowing yourself to keep him close. 9. Because your future self was calling you back. You've seen here, in flashes, it's a version of you who no longer begs, explains, or chases. The woman who looks in the mirror and no longer sees guilt, but grace. She exists. She's real. And she began reaching for you the moment you forgot who you were. That's what intuition often is. The echo of your future self, traveling back through time to interrupt your self-abandonment. She watched you justify his behavior. She watched you cry in bathrooms and delete messages you wanted to send. And still, she didn't judge you. She just waited until you were ready to remember her. Your intuition became the bridge between that future and your present. It said, you don't have to stay here. There is more. And it gave you just enough strength to walk away. Not because you had it all figured out, but because you were ready to find out who you could be without him. 10. Because your soul has always known the difference between love and possession. There is a knowing that lives beneath language, a primal intelligence that feels the texture of energy, not just the content of words. And your soul felt it from the beginning, that something was off. That his desire wasn't about connection, it was about control. That his compliments had strings. That his presence, though intense, was invasive. You may have doubted yourself, questioned your reactions, tried to make sense of the dissonance. But your intuition didn't need a reason. It felt the truth. And when the mask began to slip, when the charm wore thin and the pressure grew heavy, your soul didn't flinch. It rose, because you were never meant to be possessed. You were meant to be loved, not owned, not tamed, but witnessed, honored, and held. Your intuition remembered that, even when you forgot us, and it chose your freedom over your fantasy. That's not weakness. That's sacred rebellion. And it saved you from losing yourself in someone who never truly saw you. You didn't leave because you stopped loving him. You left because somewhere deep inside, you heard a sound louder than his promises. The quiet, unwavering hum of your own soul returning to you. That hum was not made of rage or pride. it was woven from truth. And when truth speaks, even gently, it shakes the foundations of every lie we were taught to build homes in. He wasn't a mistake. He was a mirror, a threshold, a thunderstorm sent to awaken you. Through him, you remembered your silence, your surrender, your sacred ache to be chosen without condition. And when you finally chose yourself, not in a dramatic moment, but in a breath, a tear, a silent no more, the universe bowed to your decision. There is a difference between walking away out of fear and walking away because you've finally seen clearly. The first leaves you haunted. The second sets you free. You didn't escape love. You escaped the performance of it. Kent, in the ruins of what could have been, you built the altar of who you truly are. Now, every time you doubt yourself, every time the old ache rises, return to that moment. That sacred, trembling moment when you listened to the quiet voice that said, "Go," even if you still love him, especially if you still love him. Because loving him should never mean losing yourself. You are not the same woman who once stayed silent. It's not the same girl who waited for someone to see her pain and choose her anyway. That version of you needed rescuing. This one needs space to bloom. She doesn't scream to be heard. She speaks with grounded fire. She doesn't beg for love. She embodies it, not for others, for herself. There is a rebirth that happens not in hospitals or temples, but in the dark corner of your room at 2 a.m. when you finally let go of a man who never saw you. You die a quiet death, one only you can witness. And in the morning, you walk into the world with the same skin, but a different soul, one stitched together with threads of courage, grief, and radical self-return. People will ask if you're okay. They'll say you look softer, quieter, wiser. They won't know that your silence now is holy, that your softness is forged in fire, that your wisdom came not from books, but from heartbreak. They'll see your glow and think it's peace, but you'll know it's survival, it's sovereignty, it's sacred reclamation. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. And in that choice, you're not just healing the present, healing every version of you who was ever told that love must be earned through suffering. You're rewriting the lineage of your heart, and your intuition, she is smiling now because you finally heard her and you believed her. This journey isn't meant to be walked alone. Yes, the awakening begins in solitude, but the healing deepens in community, in the sacred spaces where other women gather, not to perform perfection, but to unravel their truths and stand bare beneath the moonlight, where silence isn't awkward, it's reverent. This space is that sanctuary, a temple for the intuitive, the wounded, the wise. Here, we speak of things the world calls irrational, dreams, gut feelings, energetic pulls. We speak of pain, not as weakness, but as prophecy, of heartbreak, not as failure, but as a rite of passage. So if something in this story echoed inside you, you are not alone. We are many daughters of silence, seekers of truth. And this channel exists so you never again feel like the only one who heard the warning before the storm. You belong here, not because you're healed, but because you're awakening. Subscribe if you feel the pull. And in the comments, I ask you this: when did your intuition try to warn you on? What did it say? Let your voice be heard, because every story shared here becomes a thread in the great tapestry of return, the return to the self, to truth, to love that doesn't demand your silence to survive. Thank you for staying, not just through the minutes of this video, but through the moments when your heart cracked open. It's through the truths that weren't easy to hear, through the silent recognitions that stirred your breath, through the ache that reminded you you're still alive, still feeling, still becoming. If you made it to this point, you didn't just watch a video, you crossed a threshold, and I want to thank you for that, for your presence, for your willingness to sit with discomfort instead of rushing to fix it, for allowing yourself to remember things your mind tried to forget. If this message touched something in you, if it echoed a memory, a wound, or a truth you were afraid to name, I invite you to leave a comment, not just for engagement, but as a ritual, okay? A way to speak back to the part of you that stayed quiet for too long, a test to witness you. Your story matters here, and if you feel the resonance, if this space feels like soul recognition, subscribe, not for algorithms, but to stay connected to a community that is not afraid to go deep, to feel fully, to rise slowly, and to heal in the sacred rhythm of the feminine. Every like is a soft ripple, a way for the message to reach another woman sitting in her own quiet storm, wondering if anyone else feels what she feels. You are not alone, not now, not ever. And I am so grateful you're here. This space was made for you.